go. And we are back. If everybody can just let me know in the chat if you can hear me okay. Let's go ahead and make sure we make the most of the next session we've got together. So thank you everybody for sending in the critical client flows over the break. I've had a look at those and had some suggestions. I think there were some common things that had popped up there. And I also had a look through the chat, and there are a couple of questions that had popped up as well. And then there might be some additional questions. If you want, you can type that into the chat, and happy to workshop them for the group. Probably the first one that came to mind, I noticed Heidi had a couple of questions in the chat earlier. One was with regards to securing the IP. So once you start to build up your systems and your processes, the question was around how do you stop theft from team members and those sorts of things. So there's a couple of ways to do that. It depends on where you're storing the systems. So if it's just a Dropbox folder and all of the systems are stored in there as Word documents, that might be something that's a little bit more challenging to secure the permissions around. There are other platforms. I know Rob's going to be talking about some tech tomorrow. Some things to think about though, as long as you can assign the systems to the team members and they only see the systems that are relevant to them, that's one way to do it. And depending on how senior they are, like maybe a team leader might need to see all of them or all of the systems in a particular department. But maybe a team member, especially while they're new and joining, maybe it's only more relevant that they see the systems that are relevant for their task, and maybe some cross-training and things like that. So Rob, no doubt, will have some suggestions on that tomorrow to dig in a little bit deeper, but there are some custom platforms that can help you secure that IP a little bit more. Also thinking about what your long-term solution is, like the goal is to try and make this as easy for your team as possible. So you want to keep that in mind. And also, if it ever does come time to sell, it's one of those assets that the business owner or the potential acquirer will be looking at. So how you present it and deliver it will come into consideration when they're valuing the business as well. Heidi had another question as well around not reinventing the wheel. And this is once you kind of get the idea of business systems, and then you start to realize most problems in business have already been solved before. And that means not only that, I often find that from one business to the next, there's actually quite a lot of similarities. All businesses need to generate leads. All businesses need to convert those leads. All businesses need a system for the way that they hire and onboard staff, or the way that they manage staff. The biggest difference from business to business is usually around the operations. It's the delivery of the core product or service. But there's actually quite a lot of similarities. And when you think of your business as a collection of systems, and if you've got a particular problem in your business and you're looking for a systems-based solution, if you don't have enough leads, you're looking for some lead generation systems, the shortcut there is to think, well, who already has solved this problem? And how can you go to them and extract the system or the process that they're using? They may or may not even be aware of it, but that's something that we'll talk about. I know Michael Gerber, the author of the E-Myth, actually did that with me and effectively extracted a system from me. And I'll walk you through a little bit about that. I know it's touched on in the book, but there's a particular lesson I want to pass on from that. Then I know there was another question, I think from Donna. She had mentioned, what did she say? Yeah, what happens when we let our team create the system that doesn't align or talk to the other systems across the business or across divisions? So one of the jobs of the business owner, and while Systemology, it's been designed to where we can remove the business owner from the equation as quickly as possible, at least when it comes to the documentation side of things with the systems, you want to also be involved in the critical client flow. Like that's why I'm getting you involved in creating that, because that you're identifying the business. Like the job of the business owner is to build a business that works, and it works without them. And the idea of the critical client flow is to identify the minimum number of systems required to make that happen. So how do you deliver value to your clients, and how do you do it without key person dependency? So value being, how do we grab their attention? How do we sell them? How do we onboard them? How do we deliver that core product or service? And how do we get them to come back? just focusing in there. So by you designing that, Donna, you're effectively setting up the blueprint and giving them the field in which you want to operate. Then as we move into the next section, we'll talk about, well, where does that knowledge reside? Who's currently doing it best? How do we extract it out of their brain? How do we make that easy? And whose responsibility will this be? Like if you have to identify a systems champion or someone to drive this initiative forward, you may have to connect some things together. But what I want to avoid doing is completely re-engineering the business first. Let's figure out what best practice is, get everybody up to that level, because that can oftentimes get a huge win for the business. And then once that happens, then further down the track, we can think about re-engineering it and fixing up issues and things like that. So, I mean, we can talk a little bit more about that. As far as like some of the feedback, and I took a couple of screenshots of some of the critical client flow session or bits that came in. Let me do this so I can still see the chat here. Okay, so these were some of the critical client flows that were messaged in from the group. You know what? Oh, there we go. Yep. So obviously that's zoomed out, so we can't see the huge detail, but probably some things that popped up that were consistent across the board. One is, at least in this first bit, there's not a huge need to put loads of detail in. You can see some of the boxes, people are trying to almost explain the process in the box. And that happens a little bit later. For now, we just have to identify, and then some of the later stages we'll put the detail in, particularly when we get to the delivery of the product or service. When it's quite complex and you might need a range of subsystems, we first start off very high level. And what is the overview of the delivery of your product or service? We might be thinking about the milestones and the key steps. And it's almost like a system for your project manager to follow. And I'll show you some examples from some of my previous businesses as well, to give you an idea of what that might look like. The other thing as well is where to break up a system, or think of the critical client flow almost like each one of those boxes will end up becoming a system. So where you put one thing in one box and another thing in another box, sometimes I think of it in terms of, a team member might handle this box, another team member might handle this box, or maybe it's a certain period of time that needs to elapse. So for example, well, the salesperson is going to handle the incoming inquiry, the qualification, the sending out of the quote, the follow-up process. Like, even though that might all be handled by the same person, sometimes splitting it up, because it might happen over a period of time, and it's almost like stages that they have to move through. So just having a little bit of a think about how and where you break some of those boxes up. And this doesn't have to get set in stone either. Over time, you might need to make some changes and tweaks and things like that, where you'll say, it makes more sense if I break this into separate systems rather than having it all documented in one document. The whole idea of systems becomes a little bit fluid over time. So just before we jump into sort of the next little bit, and we'll bring Deb back and we'll go, okay, well, what happens next? I don't know if there are any other questions, or if anyone had some challenges. I mean, I'm happy to get you to stick your hand up, and then potentially Simon can unmute you, and then we can have a little bit of a chat and see if we can answer some of your questions. I'm looking at things where if your brain says, yeah, but my business is different, and you for whatever reason, you've stopped moving forward, or you've closed off to say, this won't work for me. I want to just make sure that we can unblock that, just in case anybody else has the same thing. I know, I used to own a rock and roll clothing music store. It was called Planet 13. It was a little bit like, I know a lot of the audience is here in Australia, so it's kind of like Off Your Tree, except it was parent friendly. So, we didn't sell long paraphernalia or T-shirts with expletives written all over it. We were trying to replicate what a company out of the US called Hot Topic was doing, and we were trying to grow those here. And we systemized the business with the idea that we're going to franchise. And we did. We franchised the first store. And when I think about that business, I mean, it was a retail store and it still had a critical client flow. We weren't issuing out proposals. I wasn't, quoting someone up on their AC/DC t-shirt, but there was a flow. They would come into the store, they'd look at the t-shirt wall, they might pick up a product. I'd want to get them into the change room. I might try and give them additional clothes, for them to try on in the change room. They would get up to the front counter. I'd try and upsell them some stickers and patches and buttons. Then when they're ready to go, we might finish up by grabbing their name and their email to get on our database. So we would continue to have conversations with them. So, I mean, every business has this flow. It's how do you grab the attention of the person and move them through that process? So I don't know if anybody had any questions, thinking about, this won't work for me. You can see here, Deb here, moving forward, should extra CCFs be based on a client or product or service, or does this normally depend on each business? Probably the biggest thing to think about just for the moment is to suspend any thought of extra CCFs, because what people end up doing is they think I'm going to try and do 3 or 4 CCFs all at once, and then they oftentimes don't take anything through to completion. So just focus on the one for now, because there are some other systems we'll have to think of to scale your business as well, like staffing systems, hiring and onboarding and managing, and some finance systems. And that would probably all happen first before we do another CCF. What I'm looking for you to create through this process, it's the minimum viable systems to run your business. We start off with the critical client flow, but later on, we think about each department. What's the 80-20 of each department, and what are the minimum set of systems required to deliver the bulk of the result for that business? So probably the little nudge there, Deb, initially would be to say, just pop the idea of extra CCFs on ice. All right, there are some other questions coming in here. So I don't know if we want to unmute one or two, because rather than me kind of reading it out at length here, we could probably get Lauren. I don't know, Lauren, if you want to unmute yourself, or if someone can unmute Lauren to talk us through it. Looks like she's
I'm here.
Lunch, so
good timing. I knew that would happen.
Always the way.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a long time ago, my business was really different to what it is now. And I was nominated for an award, and the panel said to me, what happens if you're dead on a bed? Can your business still operate? And at the time, the answer was absolutely not. These days, we are really getting into this. We're systemizing a lot. We've got a team, but we're also the people that are on stage, that are delivering events, that are coaching and teaching at a high level to our clients. This is at the moment what all 3 of us are into. But it's like with Tony Robbins' business model, with Sean's business model, how would they step out of the business if the business is based on them?
Yeah.
And what if they don't want to?
Yeah, and that's okay as well. Depends on the type of business that you're building. Like what Sean and other businesses have to understand is that they've built the business around them, and they're effectively an employee of that business. So in situations like that, you want to systemize everything around the magic. Sean's bringing the magic when he'll speak on stage. So let's make sure that whenever Sean's delivering the magic, that's all he has to think about. Everything else around him happens, but he's still building a business that is dependent on him. There's no...
But basically the concept is, whatever business you're in, if that business is dependent on you in some way, whether it is a personal branding business, or maybe you're a specialist like a lawyer or something like that, it is going to be largely dependent on you. But that doesn't have to be your freedom business, right? So as you guys have seen, I've shown you before with our mission, and our mission for the summit is to create an education business alongside my personal branding business that is not branded my name, which means that would be servicing a much larger, much broader scope of people. I do this because it's my passion, right? I have other businesses that run under management already. So I've already got freedom businesses which gave me the opportunity to do this. And when people say, what would you do if you didn't need to earn any money? Well, this is what I'd be doing. But it's also a business at the same time. So it's that thing of it's and, not or, right? The problem is obviously early stage, it can be just the one, but the goal is to build freedom businesses to minimize your risk. Once you build one, it's very easy to build another because you know how to do it now, right? You might find you can build one in another space. So, but as long as you're doing it for the passion piece to get on stage and all that sort of stuff, just make sure you're also building the freedom business behind it.
I love that insight, and that's perfect as well. And everybody's kind of like, as their business grows, you kind of move through those 4 stages of business systemization that I talked about as well at the start. Like when I think of where we built the digital agency up to, where it was saleable and I was completely out of it, now I think of SYSTEMology. SYSTEMology is a startup again for me. I am back in the operations and we're working to build out divisions of that business that can be delivered without me. So there's components of this that are still involved with me, but having parts of the business that can be delivered without the business owner is really key. The business needs to be able to deliver value at some level that isn't key person dependent. Otherwise, there is a big risk there. And that risk is that person. So I think Emmy, was it, had a question as well. I don't know if we want to unmute her, and then we might even jump to Sean and take a couple of questions from the room as well. Is it, Emmy, am I pronouncing that correctly? And if you're around, I think I just had a note there from David. Yep, there we go.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
There we go. Yes, how can I help?
So we've been working with Sean for some time now, and he has always advised us to systemize as much as possible. So we have particular paint products that we've helped develop with our paint partners, and they are unique to us. There's quite a lot of intricacy around the application and variables and things that can go wrong on job site. So to have a manual or to systemize it, we're a little bit hesitant because it's sort of one of our unique selling propositions that we have the intel around this product. So, but we need team members that are highly trained to be able to use this product. It can be a very costly fix-up if it goes wrong.
Yeah, look, this is an interesting one. And kind of the first thing that popped out into my brain was sometimes people say, what if I train a team member up and they end up leaving me? I put all that effort into training up that team member and they left. And then the response to that is, what happens if you didn't train up a team member and they stayed? And now they're sort of unskilled. So you don't really have an option not to train up a team member if you want them to improve and reduce errors and things like that. So that's one thing. But that said, also, we don't want to deliver it on a silver platter where we just go, hey, here's my business and now I'm training you up to become my biggest competitor. So there are some things that you could do depending on the business, and it'll vary whether or not it's worth looking at non-compete clauses in employment contracts. I mean, that's something that you could look at. This is probably a little bit outside of my scope. There's a lot more to running a business than just the doing of the work. There are all of the different departments, and we're talking about the systems for marketing and sales, and then we're talking about the doing of the work, and then we're talking about the HR and how all of these work together. So they might be siloed into the systems that are relevant for them, but that's not going to give them enough to then go create another business. And I mean, sometimes for me, I just kind of feel like you just want to get down to it and do it. You also don't want to hamstring your success by in the back of your mind being worried about someone coming in and, what may or may not happen. You don't want that stopping you from doing your best work. So I don't know, Sean, if you wanted to add anything to that, and also whether or not there are any questions in the room.
We do have some questions, so we'll actually jump over to some questions in the room. We'll start with Lizzie, and we'll go to Mick.
Hello. Going back to the critical client flow. So the money stage on our flow would probably be more towards the end. Can I move the flow, or does it does the flow stay the same?
Yeah, 100%. Like I want you to capture what you're currently doing. And if you don't collect money at that point, like I know some businesses, you don't take a deposit up front. You take all of the money on completion, and that's okay as well. So if you need to make some minor modification and change the flow, then that's okay.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, perfect.
G'day, Dave. Mick here, mate. Thanks for your time.
Yeah,
One thing I think that comes up probably for a lot of trade-based businesses as well is and it's definitely a story that I'm sure we can work through, but probably a poorer demographic of employees that since starting with Sean, we've implemented stuff that has been difficult to get across, but we've actually seen firsthand through plenty of persistence that it can be done, but new processes and things like that is going to be our biggest hurdle, I think, to get the systems across the line working well.
Quite common, and to compound that most of the resistance is going to happen upfront from your existing team members. New team members that come on board, once you've got an onboarding system for new team members and you're training them and getting them to the point where they come on board and, this is just how we do things here, it's actually easier. It's one of the reasons why a lot of people abandon this idea of systemization, because all of the resistance happens up front and they meet some of the resistance and then they don't stick with it. But you'll find once you get over that hurdle, I'd be thinking about it, particularly in your space, maybe it's got something to do with the onboarding process and also the recruiting process. There's little things you can do, like when you run a job ad, or depending on how you're finding people, sometimes I will share, or not sometimes, we share some of our systems and our processes in the recruiting process. And I say, hey, here are some of the tasks that you're going to be doing. And it shows right up front that, hey, we have a way of doing things and we're systems driven. And that will repel some team members that really don't connect with that. So I do know the trades business can be challenging. There's a lot of the trades business part that can be done. And maybe you start with that. Think about everything that happens at head office, the monitoring of the books, the marketing, the sales, the booking of the jobs, try and do all of those other things. I always say, let's start with some of the easy stuff first. Sometimes if you just go straight for the hardest stuff and then it doesn't quite connect, it can be disheartening. And then you could just go, it doesn't work in my business. So, we can explore that a little bit more. The other things that you could think about also for the trades-based business is first think in terms of creating a system which is more for your project manager. So the person who might oversee the work getting done, and you're creating the milestones, and they might be a higher caliber team member as opposed to all of the subsystems that might be relevant to your subbies, because they might kind of be replacing, and maybe it's hard to kind of swap them in or out. So yeah, another example, I remember working with a karate school, and they were having some real challenges getting their karate instructors to follow the systems, because they ended up creating, they wanted at the end of a class, all of their karate instructors to hop into a project management platform and tick off about 20 different items before they could check it off. And none of the karate instructors ended up doing it. And so they said, well, how can we make this even easier? And what we ended up doing is they ended up creating a Google form where at the end of every class, they went to this URL. It was like karate.com/finish class. And it was just for the karate instructors. And it was a form that they had to answer 5 questions and hit submit. And by doing the 5 questions, it was like, who have I filled out the attendance form? Did I clean the equipment once everything was done? Did I have any extra comments? And then someone would hit submit, and they tied getting paid to the submission of that form. So there might be little tweaks like that. You'd have to explore that on a case-by-case basis. That's something like, we'll talk a little bit about Rob later. We certify people in Systemology that go in and try and solve those types of problems that are unique to an industry. As long as you get the takeaway, is sometimes it might just take a little bit of creative thinking to get around that, but hopefully that helps a little.
Do you think Do you think that involving the guys, like you said, leadership guys, do you think involving them with the process will break down the resistance?
People do end up supporting what it is that they help to create. So the shorter answer is yes. Getting some of your leadership team involved in some of these early processes. And one thing I would suggest is giving all of your leadership team a copy of Systemology and saying, this is how I want to do things here, and I need your help to implement it. So that's definitely part of the process. And also when it comes to the extraction, which we'll explore in a moment, similarly, getting knowledgeable team members involved in that extraction process and development process will make it easier for them to support it and get that level of buy-in. So,
it's Andrew here. I'll just add something little to that.
Please.
Is we go to a fairly in-depth extent to explain to them exactly why we're bringing in a new process and exactly what's in it for them and why it's going to make their life easier or why it's going to make the business more profitable. Therefore, we can share the love or they just got to really understand why. So it's not another, what's this fucking form we've got to fill out?
That's right.
So they know exactly what the advantage is.
So there's 2 or 3 key things there, Andrew, that you knocked on, and it was perfect. So the first one is, once you nail your critical client flow, teaching the critical client flow for new onboard hires and also your existing team helps the team member to understand what happens before me and what happens after me. And they then start to think about, well, where do I fit into this process? Which bit am I delivering? And it helps them to go, other people are dependent on me. Things are happening after the sale. And that is part of it. Also, when you introduce it, and this is like step number 5 in the Systemology process, we talk about getting team member buy-in. And you want to actually phrase it in terms of what is the benefit to them. Team members aren't going to get excited by the idea of, hey, we're going to systemize so that the boss can go on a longer holiday and so that they can make more profits. Yes, that gets me out of bed in the morning. No, we want to think in terms of what is the benefit to them as an individual. Hey, fellow team member, when you go on holidays and even when you've got time off, I'm messaging you, following you up and asking you, where's that thing? Where did that go? And I ask you to check your email because I need your help. Or maybe when you take time off, you come back and your inbox is full of 100 tasks and nothing's moved forward while you've been gone, and you end up spending the next 3 weeks catching up for the 1 week that you had off. Well, one of the reasons we're systemizing and doing this is so that team members can step in and do some of the tasks while you're on leave, and then you can come back and hit the ground running and you can have a restful holiday and not have to think about work. So that's more beneficial for the team member. Or maybe you say to a team member, for those ones that are really ambitious, if you want to work up in the organization, if you start systemizing parts of your job and delegating them to lower cost team members, then you actually become more valuable to the business because now I can give you higher value tasks. So it's a little bit counterintuitive to let them know systemizing your role doesn't mean that you're going to move all of their jobs offshore and they're going to be out of a job. Quite the opposite, because that's sometimes a concern for some people. You let them know systemizing your role, delegating it down to junior team members. Now I can give you higher value tasks. You're now more valuable to me in the business. That's how you work your way up and becoming a department head. So again, it'll depend on different team members, but I think the point Andrew made me think there is part of this idea of getting buy-in is letting them understand what the benefit is to them. So let's jump into the presentation because I've got a little bit we need to cover and we need to bring Deb back and talk about these next couple of steps. So let me do a few things. I need to share my screen. I need to open the chat so I can see some of you. I'll move this down here and then I'm going to hit start on that presentation. Okay. So there you go. That's some of the screenshots from what came in. But again, the whole idea here is your primary job as the business owner is to build a business that works without you. Like, that's why, I mean, this whole idea of making it urgent and important, you can't build a business that works without you, without the systems and the processes in place. So I might just double check if I shared the right screen there. There's that full screen for you guys, and you can see all of the critical client flow on the sheet. Just type yes. Yeah, perfect. I can see some thumbs up. Good. So, and just remember this idea of the business being a game of snakes and ladders. Like, you're moving up the board. Occasionally you're going to land on a snake. And, you know, Melissa resigning for me was a snake. If you have systems and processes in place, it gives you a chance to think and actually step over the snake. So being well prepared meant that I missed it. But similarly, there'll be times when you land on a ladder as well. Now, most business owners are so busy that even if they stood on a ladder and it was the best opportunity in the world for them, and they could basically go from square number 13 to square number 46, or maybe square number 74 to 92, that they couldn't climb up the ladder because they're just too busy. So part of creating systems is about creating space for the business owner. So when the opportunity does fall in your lap, you can take advantage of it. So I mean, in the book, I talk about my Snakes and Ladders event. I landed on the Michael Gerber ladder, and he contacted me, or his wife did, completely out of the blue to help him launch the final book in his E-Myth series, Beyond the E-Myth. At the time, I had not launched Systemology. It wasn't known. They contacted me because of the digital agency. That was a Snakes and Ladders opportunity, completely out of the blue. The godfather of business systems, he wrote the book, The E-Myth. If you haven't read it, it's a great book for building the case of why business systems are important. And then he contacted me out of the blue, and his wife said, I want you to come and work to help launch Michael Gerber's final book in the E-Myth series, Beyond the E-Myth. And I need you to come work on it full time for 3 months. Most business owners, if the Oprah of their industry came and knocked on their door and said, I have a dream opportunity for you to come and work on me, and my business, and work with me on this project, but you're going to have to go all in and step away from your business. Most business owners couldn't do that. And whether it's Michael Gerber or any other opportunity, oftentimes, you know, if I mentioned the idea of Oh Crap, that company that does the compostable dog poo bags, if they weren't ready for the RSPCA opportunity, they wouldn't have been able to climb up that ladder. Systems give you space to spot the opportunity and follow the opportunity, because you build a business that isn't dependent on you. And when a business isn't dependent on you, it means that when you spot something, you can actually follow it. Now, for me, that's been tremendous. Michael now endorses Systemology. He says basically every business owner needs to go through the Systemology Academy, and we've got some amazing endorsements from him. I won't tell you too much about the story in the book, but one lesson, and it kind of touches on something that Heidi said that I learned from this. Michael Gerber, he doesn't like writing systems and processes either, yet he's known as the systems guru, but he is the least systems documented person that I know. He's a visionary who sees things in his mind, and then he goes to work on creating it. But he surrounded himself with the right team. And if he doesn't know how to do something, he wrote a series of books. There's the E-Myth, but then he wrote a bunch of other ones, like E-Myth for accountants, E-Myth for lawyers, E-Myth for bookkeepers. And he partners up with these industry experts and helps to co-author these books. And he had never really helped the co-author launch a book. So part of the reason why they contacted me, because all of Michael's previous books, they went through HarperCollins. That was the publisher. But this was the first book they decided to self-publish. And because they self-published it, they didn't have a system for the way that they launch books. So he sought me out, even though I don't, launch books. They happened to see me launch my first book, Authority Content. And the wife, Michael's wife, Luz Delia, said, oh, I like what you did. Can you do that for Michael? So the reason they engaged me is because they didn't have the system for how to launch books. I launched Michael's book part of the deal was they got me to document it, and now they teach that to all of their other co-authors. So if you reach a problem in business, that problem has probably already been solved by someone else. And over time, if you develop a method for extracting and creating a system and process, sometimes the shortest path to get the solution is to find out the expert or the consultant who already knows how to do the thing and capture their system and process. So what I'm trying to do here is kind of release this idea that you need to be the one that generates all of these systems and processes. So that's part of why I talk about that. I want to show you some ways to quickly and easily create some of these systems. So step number 1 in systemology is the critical client flow. And we define the 10 to 15 systems that we want to document to be able to deliver that core product or service. Then step number 2 is about who already knows how to do this in the team at the moment, and how do we make it easy for them? Because the business owner oftentimes thinks that they should be the person who does this. And later on, they might help to re-engineer it, but let's just figure out current best practice and bottle that, because bringing everybody up to that standard can get you a significant win. So I'm going to help you identify if you're the right person to be creating some of the systems and processes. If you go to this URL, systemology.com/TRS, which stands for Team Revealer System. And I'm going to do this work with Deb right now, and I'll show you what this quiz does. This is going to help identify if you or someone else on your team is the best person to be creating your systems and processes. So are you still around, Deb? Might get you to just come on to the screen. There we go. Hey, Deb, you're back.
Yep.
So let's ask you some questions, and everybody can do this as well, because you can kind of follow along. So Team Revealer quiz. Are you the right person to be creating the systems?
Hopefully not.
Let's find out. Let's find out. So first question, Deb, in your role, do you feel that, how do you feel about systems, processes, and checklists? Would you say, I don't need them, they would be helpful, or I love them?
They're helpful.
They're helpful. Next question. Have you personally created any sort of system or process or checklist in the last 90 days?
Yes.
If you had to put a piece of furniture together, would you follow the instructions or work it out as you go because you kind of know what the end result's like? Do you follow instructions, or do you just kind of figure it out as you go?
I follow the instructions.
Perfect. Which do you prefer more? The challenge of working out how to fix things, or the satisfaction of completing a task?
The satisfaction of completing tasks.
Which of these roles do you identify with most? Now, there are 3 sort of roles. There's leader, manager, or other. So a leader is typically like a visionary. They're the owner of the company oftentimes. They're the primary idea creator. A manager, they're more usually the day-to-day type people who manage the team, or would you say you fall into another category? Because you're a little bit of both, aren't you?
Yeah, at the moment, I'm the manager.
Yep.
I'm aspiring to be the leader.
Yep. All right.
But right now, I'm the manager.
Yep. Let's just see what happens. What's a typical day look like for you? I don't have enough time to get all of my work done. Oh, sorry. I have time to get all of my work done and help my other team members. I have time to get my work done and take only my breaks. And I hardly have time to get my own work done.
That one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. And what's most like you when you're faced with a complicated task? Do you just do it? Do you break it down into simpler steps to follow, or do you ask for help? When you've got a complicated task, do you just do it, try and break it down into simple steps, or do you ask for help?
I usually find a subject matter expert. So probably I just do it, or I ask for help.
Yeah, perfect. If you had to pick one?
Just do it.
Yep, perfect. All right. So the integrator, sometimes we talk about a manager as an integrator. That term comes from the book Rocket Fuel by Gino Wickman. But you've got traits of an integrator, and you appear to be a good candidate to drive the systemology process forward. But we still recommend finding a systems champion to do the heavy lifting, especially the documentation, because you're quite busy. So the short answer is you're probably quite good to oversee the implementation of systemology, but I probably wouldn't suggest that you do the documentation, because you're super, super busy. So you're probably not going to find the time to do it. So I would love to know if anybody else has filled that out in the background as well. And if you can type into the chat what you came back with. There you go, leader. And what did the leader say? If you've still got that up on the screen, did it say that you should be doing the systems or someone else? Anyone who got the leader, there you go. So David wrote this: you've got traits of a leader. That typically means you're not the best person on the team to be creating the systems and the processes. We suggest finding a manager and or systems champion to help you extract. There you go, leader, no systems. Good, good, good. So do that as just a little bit of a way, because I want you to understand that you might not be the best person on the team to be creating the systems and processes, and that's okay. There you go. Dan said that he's an integrator with low additional capacity. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea whether or not you should be creating it. And I mean, it's the same with all of your team members. Oftentimes your best team members are the busiest. So we need to think about how to make it easy for them. I'm just going to open this back up here. I'm going to have to just move this down here. Okay, got my chat. All right, just so I can see you all still. All right, then I can see here, yeah, a few people looking for an integrator. Position open. Very good, very good. Okay, I'll just go back to my presentation just here. So this is, I mentioned this guy earlier. His name's Dave Porter, and he runs that company, PorterVac. He is the visionary leader, and he's tried to systemize in the past and didn't have any luck, mainly because he was trying to do it all himself. And then when he came across systemology, it was like immediately clicked. He goes, oh, wow, there's just things about systemology that get me to look at this differently. So the company, they clean the roofing gutters, as I talked about, and he's busy. His leadership team's busy. So when they decided to do systemology, they identified a systems champion. So it's the systems champion right there. His name's Kane, and he works in their main head office. Initially, he was out on the tools and as apprentice, but he didn't really quite fit in there. So they decided to put him in at head office. And when we started working with them, because initially I was the systemologist, but this is the type of work that Rob would do as well. Rob went in, and the systemologist basically pairs themselves with maybe their systems champion inside the business. And basically I guided Kane through this process. We started off and we did their critical client flow. So that's the critical client flow. Then after that, we did what we're about to do next with Deb. We started to fill out our, we call it a DRTC and systems assign sheet. You'll learn about that later. It's kind of creating a bit of an action plan. Then we started recording videos. So as I said, it started off with some screen flow and some Zoom and Loom videos, recording what happened on the screen. But then some of it was in the field. Kane actually went out in the field wearing the GoPro, followed their tradespeople around and recorded these little videos. Then he started to save it inside System Hub, where they're saving their systems. And you can see on the left-hand side there, they've got the different departments, and there are a handful of systems underneath each of those departments. Just started off with simple videos. Then someone watched the video and they pulled out some of the key steps. So it wasn't the knowledgeable person. Kane and I ended up going through and pulling out some of the key things to create version 1 of the systems, which was a handful of bullet points plus the video. And then they got through the critical client flow, and we did that over the course of 3 months. So that's how it starts to come together, how it takes the business owner out of the equation. And you might need to identify a systems champion And, maybe in Deb's example, she might oversee the initiative as a manager, but she might need to identify someone on the team who can really drive this, meet with the team. They learn how to record someone doing the task, and then they might handle the documentation. So let's take that next step, which is basically translating what we did in the critical client flow with Deb. And then what we're going to try and do is basically move this into an action plan, which is, again, it's some extra sheets in your workbook. I'm just going to double check here. Can we please see the CCF again? Yes, we'll have a look at the CCF. And then Paula asked, will we get a copy in the members area? Yes, I believe Sean is putting a copy of that in. So let's just stop this share, and we'll just really quickly start a new share. And Deb, I'm going to need your hand again, because we're going to start working through the next step, and everybody can follow along for themselves because you're going to want to do this. So screen share here. So Rob in the background, and Rob will come up a little bit later as well, and we'll do some work with Rob. Rob from the group. Rob, the idea of systemology really resonated with him, and he decided to get certified. So he helps businesses go through the systemology process. In the background, he took what we did with Deb and loaded it into, this is just a template that we use for systemologists, just so that way it's in the digital version. But this is the critical client flow that we did with Deb earlier. You can see, large bathroom renovator, frameless shower screen, the few ways that she's currently generating leads, handling the inquiry, doing the qualification, doing the on-site visit, scoping out the work, collecting deposit, doing some sort of setup, going out and doing the installation, and then I'm just going to tweak that slightly rather than onboarding. I'm going to tweak that to sort of offboarding, where there was the final few steps, things like the Google reviews and potentially asking for referrals, those sorts of things. There's the final invoice as well, and the gift. So basically, we kind of translated the critical client flow just into this document. So that's pretty much where we all are up to now. The next step is we need to start to think about, where does this knowledge currently reside in the team? So this is, you've got the worksheets to do this yourself. And in the interests of time and keeping everything moving, I've gone ahead and documented this, but I'm going to walk through this with Deb, and then we're going to have a look at how do we get this down into a real clear action plan for Deb, so she knows where to focus. So firstly, Deb, are you still available?
Yep.
Excellent. So first step is to think about your business in terms of the departments. So here are some general departments that we talk about. Marketing generates leads. Sales, that's about converting leads. Operations, that's the delivery of the product or service. Finance, that's anything to do with money in and out of the business. HR, that's recruiting team members, onboarding them and managing them. And management might be some high level stuff. Are there any other departments in your business that are relevant?
No, that's fine. I'm happy to go with those.
And do you call these anything different? I know sometimes people call them like lead generation instead of marketing, or lead conversion. No. So
we probably have less than that, but for this exercise, we might combine sales and marketing, for instance.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And that's the takeaway. Really what I wanted everybody to know here is just customize this to your own names. You might go, oh, we have a tech department, or we have an administrative department. Think of your business in terms of departments. And right at the start of the presentation earlier today, I showed you business as a whole, and then there were some departments underneath that. That's all I'm looking at identifying. And if it makes sense for you to combine some, that's okay as well. These are not set in stone, and they'll change over time. So the next thing that I did was I looked at the critical client flow, and I did this over the break. I just went, okay, well, what's attention? Attention is marketing. And then I said, okay, inquiry and qualification and doing that on-site visit. These are kind of like sales functions. Collecting the money, that's kind of like a finance task. Onboarding, and delivery. Okay, that's more like operations. And then down here, offboarding as well. And let's see where I put offboarding. I might have put offboarding in operations. Yeah, there we go. So you can just see here. Oh, there you go. Look, there's Rob's little cell right there. So we know Rob's working and tidying things up in the background, which is good. But you can see here, effectively what I've done now is I've started to think, well, where do these systems fall under which departments? The next thing I'm going to think about, Deb, two things I want to ask. One is I want to identify department heads in each of these departments and also any knowledgeable workers. So a department head, which is who do you think, do you currently have someone who is responsible for marketing? And that may be you, but if we can go through this exercise, who's the head of your marketing?
Me.
Yep. And is there anyone else on the team who you would consider a knowledgeable worker? That is, they would know how to do any of these tasks up here.
There will be from Friday. So we'll put her in now, Sarah.
Yep, perfect.
Yep.
Now, when you say, if she's starting, is she going to know how to do some of these things, or she'll get trained?
She'll get trained.
Perfect. And how about sales? Who's your head of sales?
At the moment, we're running a shared leadership model. So we're all salespeople. That's the way that depending on the department.
Now,
So
do you have anyone, because you said it's kind of shared, and sometimes that always makes me a little nervous, because it's kind of like, if it's shared, it kind of means no one is specifically held accountable. But is there someone who you would go is accountable, or is it people accountable based on divisions?
Based on divisions, people are accountable, but overall, I'm responsible for the sales budget for the entire company. So that's me.
So who would be responsible? We talked about the frameless.
Steve.
Steve. Yeah.
Yep.
Perfect. And is there anyone else that you would say is a knowledgeable worker? Is there someone who would know how to do any of these things? And when I say knowledgeable worker, it's just someone who does any of these tasks probably better than someone else. Like, do you have someone who's really good at answering the phone, or?
Yeah. So, well, in sales, there's four knowledgeable workers in their actual areas of expertise.
So if we focus on just the frameless glass one for now, is there anyone in addition to Steve that might be worthy of putting down here, where you might go, Jane?
Yes, Josh and Carol.
Say that one again.
Josh and Carol is as well.
Double R?
No, just one.
Carol.
Yep.
And for operations, is there anyone that you would say, so the delivery that you would go, is it the department head? Who would be responsible for the installation of those frameless?
Steve.
Yeah, perfect.
Yep. And Rob.
Perfect. And how about for your finance? Who does invoicing and things like that?
Carol.
Yeah. Perfect.
And Agnes. NES. Yep.
Perfect.
Yep.
And I'll just capture these now. So it's probably really just the department heads, but anyone who looks after your HR, that's like recruiting.
Me.
Yep. Okay. And then management is kind of like, those high level, more strategic decisions.
So that's the four of us at the moment. So it's myself and Carol and Steve and Rob.
Do you have someone that you class as like your operations manager, or the primary person?
We did, but not at the moment. So it's come back to me.
Yeah, so I'll just say board maybe.
Yeah.
For now. Okay. So a couple of things take away for here to think about. Firstly, you'll notice that because we just worked with the critical client flow, there are certain departments that don't have any systems identified yet, and there are certain departments that might be undercooked, because there's a lot of additional finance systems and things like that. And, it's probably even for certain businesses, there's going to be other operations. That's okay. Like later on, stage number 6 in the systemology process addresses some of the other departments, but initially we just focus here. So everybody can kind of follow along. You've got the worksheet in your little book, and you can transfer from your critical client flow into here. And the whole idea where we want to, if we can, remove the business owner from being head of a department. And we also want to identify who else has knowledge in the business on how to do certain things. Because the more that we can get the business owner out of this equation, the better. So next, once you've done this, then the next thing that we need to do is we'll jump over to this sheet just here. And I might just get you, Rob, in the background if it's okay. Just for now, can you maybe use the department head names for now, and just pop those next to here underneath the knowledgeable worker. So I'll let you do that just in the background. So what we're doing now, this is basically trying to get this down into an action plan for you. And one thing with the action plan, so we'll start off here and we'll say marketing. And this is handling when you have part of, I'm going to actually for this one, because you mentioned something I remember when we did the critical client flow, part of your offboarding included a bit around sort of setting it up for referrals and giving a gift and those sorts of things. So I kind of feel like this system is probably going to be covered in your offboarding. So I'm just going to, I'll pop that in on yellow just for now. Okay, next one down here. So the cold calling. The exercise we want to go through here is we want to get clear on what the name for this system might be, and then a small description, and then who it is we're going to chat with about capturing what they're currently doing. So for cold calling, you mentioned, Deb, this is you. Your cold calling, these ones were, what is it? Potential
bathroom renovation companies.
Renovation companies. Okay. Now, part of that as well, like I'm imagining there's a few stages to that. You're probably going to want to, how do you, build the list of candidates? Then there's probably the call itself. And then maybe there's a follow-up where you
email
send them info.
Yeah.
So what we do at this stage is we make sure that the name explains this enough as to what we're going to try and capture. And then you might put just some extra bullets. So if you remember when some people did the critical client flow, they add a whole bunch of extra detail. And I said, oh, part of that will come later. This is probably where you put some of that info. You just want to capture high level what needs to be done. Now, sometimes you're going to have to make decisions. So, for example, when you said Google, there's a lot that could mean. And sometimes I see this when someone says, social media. So let's say, I'll just add this in, even though you didn't, but let's just say social so we can discuss it to help some others. That could encompass a range of things. That could be replying to people. It could be posting status updates. It could be running Facebook ads. Like there's loads of things that it could be. What we need to do at each one of these is we think about the 80, again, come back to 80-20. When you say Google, Deb, what did you mean? Was there one particular thing, like are you doing SEO or are you doing AdWords or?
No, it's just keeping we just post our work in our Google My Business all the time, and we track. It tends to keep our, as I understand it anyway, it tends to keep our name when people Google us. The more that interaction with that Google My Business account and uploading photos every day, I think it keeps organically, it keeps our ranking somewhere on the first page, I hope.
Yeah, Google My Business to help with rankings. Perfect. Now, who's currently, you mentioned you did the calls. Who does your Google My Business stuff?
Josh.
Perfect. Excellent. So everybody kind of just starts to do this exercise on the sheet, which is if you get stuck, maybe if you said SEO, that was what it was. I'd go, okay, well, what is the main thing of the SEO? It's again, what is the 80-20? And you might go, oh, it's when I post a blog on my website. Okay, well, then the system becomes posting a blog on your website. And then you might put some descriptions. It might be doing keyword research, writing titles and descriptions, and then uploading the article and posting job photos with it, or whatever it ends up being. I think the main thing I want you to do is just think about that level. Now, the other common thing that comes up at this point in time as well, people go, yeah, but I work with a contractor who does that. So you might go, oh, but I just work with a company that does SEO, or, I get my traffic from Google AdWords, but I don't manage the Google AdWords. I go through someone else. In situations like that, initially, you might just start off and going, okay, well, what is the system, if anything, that you would need to have in place to manage that partner? So maybe it's, you work with a Google AdWords person and you say marketing, and it's like, review Google AdWords report monthly. And what do we want to do? What was our top clicks? What should we remove? I don't know. What you'll probably come up with what it is. I'm not actually saying here's how to log in and run my AdWords ad, because I work with an outsourced partner who does that. And yes, that is a little bit of a risk, but it's not I need to solve this right now risk. We want to kind of first figure out where, because if let's say that you lost this Google AdWords person and then they moved on, you're probably just going to find another Google AdWords person to step in and take over. So really, the way that you analyze on a monthly what it is that they're doing to give them feedback, that should probably be the task. So I know I'm kind of spending a little bit more just on these first few, because I just know these are the common questions, which is, what happens if I work with a provider? Do I need to capture that system? And you might later on, if you want to bring something internal or de-risk, but it's not something that you do right up front. And then the other one is, yes, oh, Dave, there's so many things in doing social media, but if we can just go, well, what is the primary thing? Just again, to capture the guts of it, because just because we don't capture a system doesn't mean that job is going to stop happening. Your business is kind of already working. All I'm talking about are what are the most important ones, and let's systemize those, which can help as well. So, I mean, I'm not going to go through all of this right now, but basically you would do this with all of these items. This becomes your first sprint. So these are the systems that maybe over the next 2 months or 3 months that you focus on. And if there are particular problem areas like Deb talked about, well, you might start off with the cold calling. And we got to first figure out, well, what do we mean? All we're doing here is creating an action plan to keep you accountable. Give yourself a bit of a timeline. You can even, once you figure out, and we'll talk about finding a systems champion in your business to drive this forward, you can pop some dates down next to it to keep someone accountable. And we meet with the knowledgeable worker who knows how to do the task. We record them doing the task, and then that becomes version 1. Then we might get someone to watch that video and pull out some of the steps. At least now we're starting the process. That's the key. Most people never get this going, and they try and over-engineer it, trying to make it just right. They'll reshape the system up front. Just capture what you're currently doing, not what you would like to be doing. Let's bottle that, and then this starts the process. So I might just see, Deb, without going all the way through, if you had any particular questions with regards to that.
I guess a common thing will be attempting to remove the business owners from the head of the department. It will be difficult for me.
And that's okay. Starting where you are, all I would say is in this first part, we want to try and think of where else does the knowledge reside. That some of these will fall with you. and you will go, okay, well, Deb needs to write out, or some, if you've got a systems champion, they need to record you making a cold call. But we already identified that Josh does some of the other things. And is there anybody else on your team that knows how to answer phone? Who answers the phone for you guys?
Yeah, Carol and Josh do.
Carol and Josh? Yep. So we just pick out who on the team currently knows how to do that task to a really good standard. And we'd select some of those. When it comes to the sales process, who is great at doing on-site visits? That's a question for you, Deb.
Oh, Steve. Well, it depends what area of the business it is. So if it's commercial, it's Rob. If it's
so, we're just focusing on the frameless shower.
Oh, it's always Steve.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
So who also who issues out an invoice to that?
Carol.
Perfect. So already, I'm just going to shut the door. Already, we've started to identify some people that can then be involved in helping to develop the systems. Later on, like, yes, it'll flag in your brain. Like, sometimes people are going to do this and they'll go, I'm the department head of every department. And that can, yeah, there you go. So that sometimes that can mean one of two things. Sometimes it could mean you are the most in need of systemology, or it might also mean you might be too early to systemize, as in you're not going to get a huge leverage point from creating documented systems because you are the only person. And maybe you need to get more traction and get an admin assistant first. And like we said right at the start, we want to get product to market fit. We want to have clients that refer and give us rave reviews and come back. And we've already got a little bit of that traction. Once you've done that, that's when we might be thinking about. So it is potentially, you may be a little bit early if you're on every single thing, but I mean, you're in the right spot. Deb, I think I did notice Paul put his hand up. And in Paul's situation, I'm going to say, you just don't want to over document. That's the risk when you're small. Just little short videos. Don't even worry about having someone go through and document. Just the video is enough.
David, can you clarify the role of the systems champion? Is it to oversee and extract the knowledge but not document?
Let's jump back into my presentation, because that's some things that we cover in there. So I'm going to share my screen. And I'll do this just here. Can everybody see my screen okay? I've got to move you all because you're sitting in front of the slides. Okay. Here we go. Okay, so we talked about some of the questions there. So yeah, now we're talking about extracting. So if step number 1 is to identify the 10 to 15, step number 2 is to figure out where is the knowledge. Now what you're talking about also starts to cross into the extraction phase, and systems champion is part of it. This is also the part, ideally, where we want the business owner to step out. The business owner is probably going to be involved in stages 1 or 2. So if you were working with Rob as a systemologist, you'd have a couple of calls with Rob where he'd go through stage 1 and 2 with you. Once we're going to get to 3, you might be involved in some of the extractions, but he might at that point be preferring to meet with your team. So example, so we're going to use a case study, and I'm going to give you 2 simple secrets that you can use and apply for easily extracting systems. So this is Chris Mulcahy. He runs a company called Mulcahy & Co. They're an accountant in regional Victoria, and they work, with agricultural businesses, farms and things like that. And you know what I'm going to do? I just realized my chat window is not open, and I might need to do that just in case anyone says anything that I have to spot. Okay. They basically help with cash flow and tax planning and things like that. Now, we did a critical client flow for them, and then after that, we did the exercise that we just did, and we created a map. Now here comes the 2 secrets. Secret number 1 is creating systems and processes is a 2-person job. You've got the person with the knowledge, and then you'll have a second person, which might be the documenter or a systems champion. It's really just someone who can make it easy, because you're busy as a business owner, your best team members are busy, and some of them don't even like writing systems and processes. So you might say to them, oh, you've got to document all of your systems and your processes. And they'll go, yeah, look, I've got 60 other things that are more important and more urgent. I'm not going to get round to it. But this is Amy. Amy worked for Chris, and she's kind of like an admin junior accountant. And they took the role of that sort of systems champion. She worked alongside with me, and she kind of helped as a systemologist. We ended up doing some of the documentation on her behalf, but she lined up the calls, did some of the extractions. And effectively what we were doing is we trained her up and taught her, because I wanted the capability to remain inside the business. The worst thing that happens with consultants is they come in, they do the work, and then they walk out, and no one ends up using any of the work because it was the consultant that did everything, and no one knows how to update the systems and the processes. You want to identify someone in the business who can take this on, who has a little bit of capacity, and it becomes part of their role. That keeps it inching forward and keeps it front and center. So secret number one is to find a systems champion who, might have some extra capacity to do some of the documentation and learn how to do that. As long as you realize it's a two-person job, don't expect the knowledgeable worker to be documenting all the systems. We want to make it easy for them. We record them doing the task, and then the documentation happens separately. Similarly, just here, the second secret is to have a system for creating systems. So, I've got a link to ours in systemology.com/academy. I definitely sent it over to Katie. I'm not sure if it made it into the final cut of the workbook, but I think they did upload it into the area, like your members area. But there is a system for creating systems. And when you combine a systems champion with the system for creating systems, you have a way of doing things. And then you basically get them to chip through this process. It starts off, they record videos getting done. It's a two-person job. The systems champion rocks up, helps to make sure that it happens, and asks questions and gets clarity. Then they might document it later. And everybody likes to edit. No one likes to write from scratch. So usually what that means is once it's been, documented, you send it back to the knowledgeable worker, and they're happy to give you feedback. But if you ask that knowledgeable worker to do it, they just won't find the time. So it's a little bit of a hack there. Probably the best way for us to do this is we're going to do a little example just in sort of the last part of the presentation. So Rob, who kind of connected with Systemology and said, this is something, I see this as a huge problem that I feel I can help to solve, decided to get certified as a systemologist. So we train up, business coaches, exit planners, accountants, business consultants, the idea of systemology and the method, and then they work with business owners. So Rob tomorrow is actually going to take you through more of this process. With limited time, I'm kind of focusing on getting the start right, critical client flow, the DRTC. We'll talk a little bit about some extraction. Tomorrow, Rob's going to talk about some tools. And then in the last part of the presentation, I can answer some frequently asked questions. But let's do a real simple extraction with Rob, just to show you how easy this is. And Rob, are you floating around and available to chat?
Yep, I'm here.
Perfect.
Hi, everyone.
Here we go. So if you know Rob and he's awesome, do you want to just type that into the chat just so I can verify?
Yes. Love it.
You just type, anybody, you can write awesome or we love Rob or yes. There we go. Some people can confirm. Good. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. A lot of love in the room for Rob. So Rob, is there any way that we can see you at the moment?
I'll do a screen share.
Perfect. All right. So what we're going to do here. So Rob, I don't know if you have your critical client flow for your own business, the Cloud Connect. Oh yeah, you've got it open just there.
Can we move that out of the way?
Let's have a look at this. So
Let me just find it.
I think it's that one there. Yes. Oh, the one
Yeah,
Cloud
just-
Connect. Oh, you might not be able
I'll
to
bring
see
this
it.
down a bit. Everything's in front of it. There we go.
Perfect. Okay, so Rob's done his own critical client flow, and I just want to show you how easy it is to do an extraction. And some things are going to be more complex than others, and we can talk about an overview system and things like that later. But let's start with something simple. This is Rob's business, and we're going to just have a look at the way that he adds a contact and a deal into Pipedrive.
Yep.
So imagine for the moment that Rob is the knowledgeable worker and I'm the systems champion, and we've loaded it up on the spreadsheet, and I've made a time to meet with Rob, and I say, hey, Rob, when we meet together, can you get a live example of someone that you can just walk through and show me how you enter a lead into Pipedrive? And then Rob goes, great, fantastic. And then here we are, we're on the call right now, and we're about to do that. So when Rob's ready, he'll go over to the right area. And then normally what I'd do as the systems champion, like I just start the video and I'd hit record at this end. Rob might do it with Loom, but I would just do a little intro and I'd say, hey, actually, we'll do that right now if you want to record it, Rob.
Yep. So I've got Loom installed, and Loom is just a screen recording software. So in this instance, I have it as a Chrome extension. So all I've done is I click that button there. I've told it to use my screen and camera, my desktop. You can also just select a tab, and then you just confirm you've got the right mic and cam installed and just hit start recording.
Perfect.
You select which screen, which desktop, in case you have two, and you hit share. So once it does that countdown,
there we go.
So I would say in this video, I'm actually going to show you how to add a user.
I'm going to do it as the systems champion, because sometimes you're working with a knowledgeable worker. Rob's awesome, and Rob knows this process, and he was almost going to do the intro on its own. But sometimes you'll be working with a knowledgeable team member who's nervous. They won't know exactly what to say. So part of the role of the systems champion, or the other person who's joining with the knowledgeable worker, is to ask questions, to make them feel at ease, to just say, hey, Rob, we're going to record through mistakes, and if you're just showing me the way that you do things, and we try and really make it very casual. So I would say to Rob at this point, I go, hey, I'm here with Rob right now. We are about to record a video. It probably falls into the sales department, and we're going to have a look at entering a lead into Pipedrive. So Rob, I'll let you just take us away and walk through, and I'll ask any questions if it's not clear.
Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is log into pipedrive.com, and I'll just log in there. So this brings us to our main screen, showing any deals that might be going on. So I could then go down to contacts, and I'll add a person. Might just put John Doe. And I'll work my way down, put the company name, what label they might have, in this case, an inner circle client, phone number, email, referred by. So any of the information that I can put in, put as much as I can. So all the way down to any addresses and any other things. So once I hit save, that person is now added into my CRM. So to create a deal from that contact, I just go to add new deal.
So sometimes I might ask a question and chime in. So I'd say, so step one here, Rob, is basically before we can even create a deal, we need to add someone into the person, add a person into Pipedrive. And then step number two, what we're looking to do is now we're creating the deal related to that person. Is that right?
Correct.
Perfect. So, I mean, that's obvious, but I'm just kind of doing that to kind of show you the job of what the systems champion might ask if they're not quite sure.
Yeah, so you might put the value of the deal there. You select the correct pipeline, the sales pipeline that you're working on, and you can also select what stage that particular deal is at. So in this case, it might be finding out what the needs are. So we select that and then hit save. So then that deal is created, and everything from that deal will take place inside of this page.
Perfect. And that's pretty much how to create a deal in Pipedrive?
That's it.
Perfect. All right. So we'll just stop the share now, and we can stop the
Yep.
recording.
So I stop the recording there, and that will be then available inside Loom. And if you want to just download it, you just click that button there, and you can select download. And that'll download it directly to your hard drive, or you can leave it in the Loom library so you can access later. And you can also share it. So you click that button there, and you can share that across, that video across to any location.
Perfect. All right.
Okay.
So let's we'll just jump back to my screen now, and I'm going to walk you through just a couple of things there. So thank you, Rob, for that. And I know everybody's going to have a lot more time with you tomorrow to kind of go through some of that tech. And I get it. We chose a really simple example, and it was short and easy. That was just to kind of show you it can be a little bit rough around the edges. It's just version number 1. Some things might be really long videos. Some things are going to be really short videos. Something is better than nothing. And just capturing the thing getting done starts the process. And that's probably the biggest thing I want you to take from here, that it's, don't look at the systems that McDonald's creates and they've been doing it for 60 years and think that's where they started. Go hire the movie The Founder and watch in that movie, one of the early scenes, they go out to a basketball court, and it, you know, The Founder, it's a movie, it's got Michael Keaton, and it's the story of McDonald's. And it talks about how Ray Kroc basically franchised McDonald's. And in the early days, they didn't really have any systems. So Ray Kroc went onto a basketball court and had some chalk, and they mapped out the store. And they said, oh, should we put the milk machine, you know, the milkshake machine here, and we put the fryer over here, and oh, let's move the grill right next to the fryer. And they went through, that's what raw systems look like when they're first getting started. So just keep it raw and make it easy and accessible for your team. Get them to talk through mistakes. That's the job of the systems champion, to kind of coach them through that process and kind of go, that's okay, because we can come back and re-record it when we need to later. And remember, by definition, the person you're recording is a knowledgeable worker. They know how to do the thing. So let them do the thing and then record it getting done. So we're kind of into the tail end. As I said, tomorrow you're going to have some time with Rob. He's going to take you through what you might do with that recording, where you might save it, how that might look once you do some of the documentation. I mean, that's step number 4 in Systemology. It's organizing your knowledge. I just want to touch on 1 or 2 things underneath the integrate stage in the time that we've got left, because, you know, you can have all of your systems documented, you can have the right tools and stored in a central location, but if the team doesn't follow it, then it doesn't really matter anyway. So you've got to get buy-in. And we touched on some of the ideas earlier as well. Like, I mean, it came up in some of the Q&A side of things. So some of the resistance we talked about how to overcome. But just to reiterate 1 or 2 key points. 1, I mentioned it gets easier. All the resistance happens up front with your existing staff. They're the ones that go, but I've always done it this way. Why do I have to change? And once you get through that and you start to change the culture and you hire some new team members and you reach the point of, this is how we do it here, then it gets easier. And the reason a lot of business owners abandon it is because they don't push through that resistance. They go, I'm not a systems person. And then they don't reap the result. And then they go, oh, I tried to systemize once, but it didn't really work. Systemizing won't work in my business. And then they just give up because they're not really a systems person. They tried to do everything themselves. They didn't get buy-in from the staff. They tried to, you know, I think it was Andrew maybe earlier who had suggested, you know, getting the team involved, and he's right, which this idea that people support what they help to create. So get that team involved. It will get easier. And if you come up against resistance, the best thing that you can do is, firstly, when you introduce the idea, blame COVID. This has probably been the easiest time in history for teams to be accepting of change. It's the only good thing that's come from COVID, because team members, they're experiencing change at home. They're experiencing change in their community. They're experiencing change at work. And you can say, hey, things are changing. We need to systemize, because there are going to be times you're going to have to work from home. There are going to be times when you're off because you can't come into work. And we need to get some systems and processes in place so that work can keep happening in this changing environment. There has never been an easier time than right now to systemize your business. So that's probably my first bit of advice. The second piece of advice is to, whenever there's a problem in the business, always blame the system first. If a team member does something wrong, look to the system, and it's the system's fault. By default, it is always the system's fault, not the team member's fault. It's only the team member's fault when they didn't follow the system. So that's probably something separate. Now I'm just going to, again, make sure, since we're coming up to the tail end, I want to make sure the chat is open for me too, just in case I get any notes here. Okay. So yeah, always blaming the system. And I need you to get over this, yeah, but my business is different. That's going to hold you back if you go, yeah, but my business is too creative. I remember with one of my businesses I used to own, it was a video production business. It was kind of like a sister company to the digital agency. The very first time I went out on a shoot, I'm not a camera person, so I don't know how to operate a camera, but I had this like a little sub part of the business. The first time I went out on the shoot with one of the team members, we spent the entire drive on the shoot. The team member was basically saying, oh, did I remember the spare batteries? Oh, did we email the client to let them know not to wear a checkered shirt because that looks bad on camera? Oh, did I bring the second camera? Oh, I wonder how long that shoot's going to go for. Oh, did I make sure that I brought the right run sheet? We spent the whole time in the car talking about things that he should or shouldn't have remembered up front. And I remembered the very first time I did that, after that shoot, we created a checklist before he goes out on a shoot. And then I remember doing the checklist and we covered off everything. And about 6 months later, I went in the car with him on another shoot. And after the checklist was in place, the discussion in the car was completely different. We talked about how the shot list was going to look, and he was planning out the shots in his head because he remembered all of the other stuff. We didn't need to talk about spare batteries and if we emailed the client, because all of that was covered by the checklist. And that's probably one thing to keep in mind, that business systems actually help you to be more creative because it takes care of all of the admin-y stuff that has to happen. So the whole idea of, yeah, but my business is different, regardless of if you're creative or not, or a business that you think can or can't be systemized. Hopefully over the course of today, I've just kind of lit something in you to kind of rethink and the way that you look about business systems. It is about changing the culture. That's key. Issues are going to pop up. You want to get the team on board, get them to read the Systemology book, get them to the point where they say, this is how we do things here. And if you can build a business that delivers the critical client flow without you, your life will change. That's what I want you to take away. You will get busy day to day. There's so many things as a business owner that will take your attention, and you'll just get busy doing the work. And this is some of the most important work that you can do and kickstart, because this is the work that gets done once and then it has lifetime impact. Rather than treadmill type work, there's always going to be issues and things that pop up. You've got to make this a priority. So definitely you're going to read the Systemology book. You're going to get your team on board. You'll start to change that language. I'm going to finish up with some questions at the end because we're right near the tail end here. Just remember that your business is a game of snakes and ladders. You're moving up the board. Sometimes you're going to land on a ladder. Sometimes you're going to land on a snake. And you just want to make sure that you've got the right systems and processes in place so you can step over the snake. And when the ladder arrives, then you can climb up the ladder. The last story I'll tell is this idea of Jeanette, and she landed on a huge ladder for her. And when I heard about this, Jeanette signed up and she started using SYSTEMology and System Hub. Rob will talk a little bit more about that. And she unsubscribed from the SYSTEMology process. And I outreached to her because I was like, why did you unsubscribe? Like, I wanted the feedback because I knew it was working for her, and she got some really great traction and the whole team was on board, and it was just humming. She runs a doggy daycare center called Diggity Doggy Daycare here in Melbourne. And she said, oh yeah, the reason I've unsubscribed is we sold the business. She said, she spent probably about 2 years systemizing the business, removed herself from the operations, and then she basically got gobbled up by a big corporate. It was Petco that bought the company at a very high multiple. Petco cited 2 reasons for buying it. It was financial performance in the systems. And they said, we see your store as a franchise prototype that we want to roll out Australia-wide. So that's what they bought. They bought the systems. And she said, they're a big corporate. So she said, they just downloaded all of our systems and then they put it into their system. So that's why she was unsubscribing. And for me, that was a huge win, because that's for her what it was she was building to. But we've got hundreds of stories like this. You'll see plenty of them on the site, whether it's absolute immigration. This guy, Jamie, on the left here, he had a bunch of staff that were sick, and he started stepping in to do some of their jobs, and he found out everybody was doing things differently. And he wanted to create a systemized approach. And then there was Web Savvy, who they had a one person who controlled all of the Facebook marketing, and they were worried what happens if something happened to him. And they used Systemology to basically duplicate that team member, and they built out a whole team around that one team member after they extracted the knowledge. And things like Mount Martha Primary. And there's loads of stories like this. Rob can tell you some of the stories as well. This is very well proven. It's a different approach. Rob's going to talk you through some of the extra steps tomorrow. We've covered a lot today. We talked about where you are now in those 4 stages of systemization. We talked about what systemology is. We talked about where to get started, how to identify those 10 to 15 systems with the critical client flow. We talked about how to quickly and easily create systems. And we talked about how to get your team on board. It's a complex topic. There are a few moving parts, and hopefully though, we've kind of lit that fire in you, pushed over, that first domino just to get you started and realize that this is important and urgent work. If you can do this, you're really going to change the game. So I don't see myself as special. I'm not a guru. I was not trained in Lean or Six Sigma or anything like that. I struggled with business. I don't even like documenting systems and processes, but I've fallen in love with what they bring to business owners. I've seen businesses with and without systems. Once you get it, and it's the culture in a business, it's night and day difference. And that's now my passion. My calling is to kind of help all business owners worldwide free themselves from the day-to-day operations. And I mean, that starts with every business owner. That starts with you. That's why I'm here. So I'll just, I'll jump off here. We might take a couple of questions, and then I know Rob will be able to pick up where we left off tomorrow. But I might just see, and I don't know, Sean, if this is where you want to chime in and we kind of take a few of the final calls or final questions.
Let's do 2 questions, Dave. In the essence of time, we're on a limit here. We have to get out of the restaurant at a particular time. So let's do 2 quick questions and then we'll wrap it up.
Perfect. All right. So either put something into the chat or...
Anyone in the room got a question? We've got a room in the room, got a question. Can't see the chat, but I can see the room. We'll go to George.
Yep.
David, thanks very much. It's George. Sorry for the dumb question. All these things, the quality assurance systems that you see around the place, ISO 900, whatever. Is this, how does this differ?
Yeah, this is something that I'm really passionate about, because ISO certification, and I've seen it many times before, is not about changing the culture. It's about ticking a box. It's, I want to go for a big tender and the company requires that I have ISO certification. So I work with a ISO certified partner. They insert a bunch of systems into a folder that mean anytime that the auditor comes around, which is usually once a year, they'll come around, they'll go, oh yeah, you've got systems and processes in place. And as a requirement, you might need to review them once a year. So the only time those systems and processes get opened up is when the auditor's coming around, because you want to be ISO certified or qualified or whatever it is. What I'm talking about here, we don't create systems for system's sake. The system has been designed to reduce error, improve efficiency. We're looking to change the culture in the team and get them systems thinking. Having a folder full of systems that are very rarely referenced or only referenced when new team members start, it's not really that helpful. So I see Systemology as very different from the ISO stuff. And same with things like Lean and Six Sigma. Lean and Six Sigma is designed for large corporates, and it's about, or manufacturing, and it's about process improvement. But there's nothing really that speaks to, but what happens if I don't yet have a process to improve? I haven't yet captured my way. And that's really what Systemology is about. So hopefully that helps to answer that question.